Hello and welcome. In this presentation, I like to focus on two aspects of light, which are closely connected. Physical aspects of light and aspects of experiencing light. Physicists are focused on material aspects of light and found out that some experiments show results as if light is a particle, some other as if light is a wave. But besides these two viewpoints, being particle or wave, we could fundamentally think of four different viewpoints. Light is particle, light is wave, light is both particle and wave, light is neither particle nor wave. Our logical mind thinks that it is necessary to opt for one of these four viewpoints because each of the four seems to be in contradiction to the other three. This contradiction is eliminated when we assume that light is a process which includes all four viewpoints as four necessary aspects or phases of an overall process. This kind of approach is based on the idea of the great Indian philosopher Nagarjuna, who postulates that all phenomena are beyond the four extremes of existing, non-existing, both and neither. I took this approach and from that developed a graphic model, which I called the quantum model. In this graphic, you can see how a wave and photon appear when the light process is animated. The photon is depicted here as a gray dot and the wave as two arrows. Photon and wave both appear or manifest seemingly out of the blue, which means from a source where neither wave nor photon are manifest. Within this source, wave and photon are just potential, but not manifested yet. Therefore, this source is called not manifested potential. The well-known quantum physicist, Professor Dürr, has described a similar process of manifesting from the not manifested in one of his lectures, where he talked about the movement of an electron from A to B. The following quote is translated from German. The point here is that there is nothing in between. In the left, the electron disappears, and in the right it will appear again, which means that out of nothing, something appears and is sinking back again into nothing. It is a lively, genuine creativity, which means that it is not a development and not an unfolding, but it is something really new, which then disappears. It is like at the beginning of the Big Bang. It takes place continuously. The world is created new every moment, but with a memory of the world before. End of quote. In the same way as described for an electron by Dürr, wave and photon arise Big Bang-like in this quantum model from the not manifested potential, which is depicted here as gray area at the bottom of this graphic. The term Big Bang used by Dürr also points to the fact that this kind of arising brings about not only new manifestations of photons, but new manifestations of space as well. This manifestation of space is depicted here symbolically as white area, extending limitless from a black dot. Dot and space manifest from the not manifested potential, flashing in a similar way as the photon. The black dot in space is like an invitation for the photon to manifest there. When the photon manifests in that place, the black dot of the space is then hidden behind the gray dot of the photon, which is shown in this next graphic. To make the black dot visible again, the black dot is depicted in this graphic a bit left from the gray dot. In this graphic, you can see the dot in space, I primary, and photon follows. The quantum model shows that light is a process where space, wave, and photon appear and disappear flash-like. Then all appearances dissolve back into the non-manifested potential immediately. After having dissolved, there is a gap where neither wave nor dot in space nor photon are manifest. This gap is depicted in this next graphic as black area. This gap is kind of an in-between, which is beyond space and time. It is followed by the next photon flashing Big Bang-like from the same ground from the not manifested potential. When people watch fireworks, photons flash at the retinas of people's eyes. In classical physics, photons are described as being lasting particles which travel with the velocity of light from the place of the explosion of a firecracker to people's eyes. According to the quantum model, photons are not lasting. They flash and dissolve immediately and therefore cannot move forward. In this model, photons don't travel but flash immediately and directly at the retinas of people's eyes when animated by the explosion of a firecracker. This happens at all the various places from which people are watching the fireworks. In quantum physics, these actions at a distance are called non-local. Non-local activity means that communication and transmission happens without signals that propagate through space. This is depicted symbolically in the graphics of the quantum model as dotted lines within the not manifested potential. After this presentation of some aspects of light which are based on quantum physics, I like to focus now on how we experience light, which includes looking into the processes of our consciousness. Consciousness and the processes of how we perceive and experience is described in great detail in the Buddhist tradition. Especially in the Tantric tradition, it is said that everything we perceive arises in our consciousness from a basic ground spontaneously. This kind of arising is explained as being Big Bang-like by Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche in one of his books. The Big Bang of our consciousness is happening at this very instant. End of quote. Because consciousness and photons both arise Big Bang-like, I depicted the process of perceiving light by the eye consciousness in a similar way as for the photon. This corresponds with what Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche points out, saying that both worlds, the animate and the inanimate world, partake of the same nature and are based on the same dynamic and creative processes, which can be described as three kaya processes. The three kayas are called Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. The Dharmakaya is the not manifested ground, which is primordial and beyond space and time. From this transcendental ground, energies arise in the Sambhogakaya and forms in the Nirmanakaya. In this graphic, the photon is part of the material world and the perceiving consciousness is part of our experienced world. Both worlds are inherently connected through a common basic ground through the Dharmakaya. Besides these two processes of the photon and the perceiving eye consciousness, there are a lot of different processes happening in the body in connection with experiencing light. For example, electric impulses flashing in the nerve system and in the brain. All such processes are depicted here symbolically under the topic of body in this next graphic. To experience light, we not only have to perceive it, but we also have to be aware of it. Therefore, I added the process of being aware in this next graphic. When the process of perceiving and the process of being aware are synchronized properly, our experience of light can be clear, knowing, lively, and open. To understand light properly, we have to see that all processes of the material world and the processes of the experience world are interconnected and synchronized properly within the Dharmakaya. This is depicted here symbolically as dotted lines within the Dharmakaya, starting from the animation of a light process which brings about flashing photons. But even without photons flashing, we can experience light and colors, for example, in our dreams. Therefore, it is said in the Buddhist tradition that we should regard all phenomena, which means everything we come across in our everyday experience, as arising and dissolving like in a dream. According to the Buddhist tradition, all phenomena of the material world and the experience world are based on three main principles. Number 1, impermanence. All processes flash and dissolve immediately, which is the most subtle form of impermanence. Number 2, emptiness. All processes arise from the Dharmakaya and dissolve back into this common source immediately. Therefore, the Dharmakaya stays unchanged. Experience of light can happen because all processes shown in this graphic are dependently interconnected within the Dharmakaya and are all arisen from the Dharmakaya. This is called emptiness, which is defined by the great Buddhist teacher Nagarjuna as follows. Whatever is dependently co-arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. Number 3, luminosity, emptiness, inseparable. According to the Buddhist tradition, the Dharmakaya has primordial wisdom, and because all processes arise from the Dharmakaya, luminosity or knowing is manifesting fresh moment by moment from that basic ground. This is expressed in the Buddhist tradition as luminosity, emptiness, inseparable. While you look at your LED screen now, each form and color on the screen is basically created by flashing processes based on these three principles, which means that there is a lot of bustle happening in the underground. But in spite of all that bustle, we can still perceive light as changing very smoothly. How this happens is explained by Buddhist teachers using the example of a movie projector. The movie projector flashes still photos in a fast sequence onto a screen. Between each still picture there is a gap, during which the projection is interrupted. Fortunately, we don't experience all that flashing and all the gaps, because this happens too fast. Instead, we experience light in a movie most of the time as smoothly changing and forms as smoothly moving. You might think that all this sounds interesting, but is there a reason to dive deeper into this new way of thinking? I do think so. Contemplating the quantum model might be helpful to get a deeper understanding of the lively and creative processes which bring about not only experience of space and light, as shown in this presentation, but bring about the whole material world and our experience world as well. Thanks for watching my video. Any feedback is more than welcome.